So I'm going through this Carthaginian documentary, and I have seen this at least once before. I think this might be the third or fourth time I've watched it, which indicates that it's entertaining. Um, this question comes up in the second half of the documentary. Um, I mean, the first half, he goes through the story of the Carthaginian genocide, and in the second half, he explores some aspects of um, more, anthropological or, well, more archaeological questions, right? That a scholar in Carthaginian history might be more interested in than the linear narrative that he would go through in a semester, and then it's the end of it, sort of thing, right? Um, the kind of thing that people in the field actually do. Um, and one of the big questions here is this question: did the Carthaginians um, kill their own children as sacrifices to their gods? Um, I think a part of me needs to suggest that if that's true, then it's probably also true that Jews eat babies. Um, and that in fact, um, it's probably basically the same thing. Um, if someone was to actually do the research and to figure out why it is that Jews eat babies, they would come to the conclusion that the reason that Jews eat babies is because Carthaginians sacrificed theirs. And that probably a large amount of the stereotypes that Roman civilization attaches to Judaism um, have a lot to do with Roman stereotypes of Carthaginians, being that the Carthaginians were from the area of Phoenicia, which is modern day Lebanon and northern Israel. Um, they weren't Arabs, that's for sure. Um, they would have been perhaps undistinguishable from Jews to the untrained individual that interprets people through crude stereotypes. Um, Even myself, as a modern educated person, I would not be able to tell the difference between a tribal group between two tribal groups from West Africa. I have no idea. Um, I am smart enough to realize that, um, but I can state it as it is, and so it's easy to understand how some you know proto-Italian trader in the north of Italy might know a lot about the Carthaginians because that's his life, and then when he sees a Jew, he's gonna think, well, you're just the same as the Carthaginian. You look pretty much the same, you sound pretty much the same, you're the same, and so therefore I'm going to apply all of these stereotypes to you. And what I think is interesting about this, and is really more kind of attached to the reason I'm making this response, let's rewind way back, because there's a story in the Bible about killing children as sacrifice. Um, Now, the chronology here is very hard. Um, this is a Pentateuch story, um, meaning that it's not as old, or at least the written version is not as old as some people would like to think it is. But how old the tradition um, is a harder question to answer. That nobody's going to really argue with that except crazy people. Um, what less people will acknowledge is that the stories that we have about Carthage um, might be newer than we realize as well. I kind of skirted around the topic when I was talking about Atlantis and Plato. Um, and this idea of dating the works of Plato to even a single period um, is tenuous, let us say. So, who knows what came first or whatever. But what's interesting is that there is a parallel there. And, how seriously you want to take these early books in the Bible, obviously. You don't want to take them particularly seriously. But this is not, what I'm drawing attention to is not the idea if God, tempted the guy to kill his kid and then said stop at the last minute. It's more along the idea of recognizing, okay, and recognize that the Phoenicians are in the Bible. They're the barbarians to the north of the Israelites. They worshipped Baal, which is used to great symbolic effect throughout the Bible. It's all over the Bible because that was the major competition to Yahweh, right? So whenever there's some diatribe about worshiping the right God, Baal is always presented as the wrong one. Images and calves and the whole thing, right? It's all about. Um, even when it's obviously not the Phoenician concept of Baal, it still says Baal. Baal is like the general wrong god, right? Which again brings us back to, were these stereotypes, when were they applied? I mean, did you correctly apply your ignorance? Did but you understand what I'm saying. Anyways, so I mean, the question: did this really happen, or was it just something the Romans made up? Well, it seems that this is a secondary source. Um, I know that presenting the Bible, as a corroboratory source is maybe not the best thing to do, but in this circumstance, I think it works out okay. Just because it indicates that that idea pre-existed. Now, that doesn't say anything about separating fact from fiction, or reality from myth, you know, reflection from exaggeration, etc., etc., right? But the basic idea doesn't, at the very least, what we can say is that it does seem as though the idea of the Carthaginians being baby killers, or the broad concept of baby killing in the area, is older than the Romans. And that whether it was true or not, it doesn't seem to be that they made that up.